To buy gold, in-game items, or boosting services in Diablo IV, check out the links in the description and use code NICO for 5% off. Hello and welcome back to another Dare to Game video. Today we're playing Diablo IV and we're going to be doing another build. Today's is going to be for the Rogue, which is probably my second favorite class to play, but it's hard to say because it is a lot of fun. But we're going to be showing you how to do this build that I like for this one, and it works both as a leveling guide, so as a build to get yourself up to level 50, but also as an endgame build. I'll go through. Now, mind you, I only have this character at level 26. So I can't actually show the full potential of the build because I haven't gotten it all the way to the top, but I will show you the skills to use and what to do and tell you when to prioritize what. So it should work as a total build, start to finish, and it's also important to remember that I recommend collecting all the Altars of Lilith because it will make a large difference in your base stats and how you can play the game effectively anyway, because it gives you a pretty big boost. The good news is you only have to do that on one character per account, and all of the characters on that account will start with that boost. So it's very, very useful. But with all that in mind, let's just dive on in and start with the skills. And so since abilities are the largest part of the build, or probably like 40%, so a very, very large part, but obviously a lot of the other stuff plays into it as well. But we're going to start off in our basic skills area, and for that we're going to put 1 point into puncture, which is going to be our basic attack. You're going to use it a lot. I use the basic attack for the rogue probably more than any other class in the game, but you will use it a lot. It's pretty useful. It says throws blades a short distance, dealing 92 damage every third cast, slows enemies by 20% for 2 seconds. Critical strikes will always slow. So this one's useful. It does oftentimes slow your enemies down, and it also just does a lot of damage. Plus it's got a medium range, so it's good for taking out all sorts of enemies from a medium distance or damaging them as they approach you. Or you can kite around and just keep doing it, and they can never hit you, and you'll just slowly whittle them down. Whatever you do, it's useful. Then we want to do enhanced puncture, so it says gain 2 energy when puncture damages a crowd-controlled enemy, which is very useful. Fundamental puncture, which says puncture now throws 3 blades in a spread, each dealing 35% of its base damage. Hitting an enemy with at least 2 blades at once makes them vulnerable for 2 seconds. So that's what we want to do for our basic skills. Then moving on to our core skills, we're going to want to start with twisting blades, which are a huge part of this build. The twisting blades are very effective, and you can boost them a lot through skills, aspects, and other things. So with twisting blades, we're going to want to put 5 points into there, and you can see it says impale an enemy with your blades, dealing 309 damage and making them take 8% increased damage from you while impaired. After 1.5 seconds, the blades return to you, piercing enemies for 495 damage. Once you've got 5 points into twisting blades, then we do enhanced twisting blades, which says twisting blades deal 30% increased damage when returning, and then advanced twisting blades, which says when your twisting blades return, your active cooldowns are reduced by 0.1 second per enemy they pass through, up to 2 seconds. After that, we're going to want to put 3 points into sturdy, which says you gain 12% close damage reduction. This one is just going to help keep you safe from a lot of the upfront melee damage that you're going to take from enemies, so that one's very useful. And then we want 3 points into siphoning strikes, so it says heal for 3% of your maximum life, which at this point equates to 15, when you critically strike close enemies. And then just 1 point into stutter step, so critically striking an enemy grants 5% movement speed for 4 seconds. This one's going to just give us a little bit of speed every time we get that crit, which helps us dance around and deal lots of damage. So very, very useful there. Then moving us down into our agility skills, the first one we're going to do is 1 point into shadow step, just so we can unlock the shadow step. This one makes us become unstoppable and quickly move through the shadows to stab your victims from behind for 318 damage. Gain 50% increased movement speed for 2 seconds afterwards. So this one's great for moving around the battlefield. I use it mostly as a mobility thing and less so as an attack. That's not to say it's not a useful attack. It does a decent amount of damage, and it's basically unblockable, so you do it every time, as it will have you appear behind the enemy that you're targeting and do a nice stab in their back. But the big thing is it's just really nice for mobility on the battlefield. We're going to want to upgrade that with enhanced shadow step, so damaging an enemy with shadow step increases your critical strike chance against them by 8% for 3 seconds, and methodical shadow step, which enemies damaged by shadow step are stunned for 2 seconds, so we're also going to stun them when we shadow step them. Next, we're going to want to do concussive, and we're going to want to put 3 points into that one, so it says after knocking back or knocking down an enemy, you gain 12% increased critical strike chance against them for 3 seconds, so once again, we're improving our crit chance. Then we're going to want to do 1 point into trick attacks, so when you critically strike a dazed enemy, they are knocked down for 0.5 seconds, and then rapid gambits, which says your evade cooldown is reduced by 0.5 seconds when you daze an enemy. So all of this is going to really help with our knockdown, our dazing, all of that sort of stuff. We're going to make it more likely, we're going to make us do more damage, and it's going to help us reduce cooldown stuff. So super, super useful there. Then of course, just 1 point into dash, because we want to unlock the dash ability. We don't need to upgrade it, we just want to be able to do it. This one is another one that's going to help us with mobility on the battlefield. So it says dash forward and slash enemies for 162 damage. Once again, it is an attack. It's just, in my opinion, it doesn't do enough damage to make sense to keep upgrading it. I just like having the ability to dash around the battlefield. And then while we're here, 3 points into weapon mastery. So gain a bonus when attacking based on weapon type. So daggers gain 15% increased damage to healthy enemies. Swords gain 9% increased damage. Bows gain 12% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. And crossbows gain 15% increased critical strike damage. So no matter what weapons you're using, it makes sense to pop those 3 points into weapon mastery. Then moving on to our Subterfuge skill area, we're going to start off with Poison Trap. And once again, we're just going to unlock it. So just 1 point into Poison Trap. Don't waste any extra points here because they don't really make that big of a difference. So what it does is you place a trap that arms after 1.25 seconds. It activates when an enemy moves within range, applying 1,576 poison damage over 9 seconds to enemies in the area. 1 point into Enhanced Poison Trap. So this one says Poison Traps knock down enemies for 1.5 seconds when it activates. We just want that because the knockdown enemies, once, as we've already talked about in the last section, we now have the skills to deal increased damage to them and help ourselves even more. Then of course we're going to want 3 points going into Exploit. So you deal 18% increased damage to healthy and injured enemies. And then we want 3 points into Malice. Currently I've only got 1 because that's as far as I've gotten into this build. But 3 points into Malice will give you up to a 9% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. Then moving on to our Imbuement skills, we're going to start with Deadly Venom, and we're just going to do 1 point into that so we can deal 3% increased poisoning damage. Then we're going to want 3 points into Debilitating Toxins, so poisoned enemies will deal 15% less damage. So every time we poison trap, they're going to be receiving damage from our poison trap, but this will make them deal less damage. So it's very useful for damage mitigation against you. So like I said, 3 points into Debilitating Toxins. And then just once again, 1 point into Alchemical Advantage, so we can gain that plus 1% increased attack speed for each enemy you've poisoned up to 15%. So those 3 skills, those 3 areas for a total of 5 points. So like I said, 1 point into Deadly Venom, 3 into Debilitating Toxins, and 1 into Alchemical Advantage. Those 3 are very, very useful, especially if we're going to be using our Poison Trap a lot, because we're going to be poisoning most of the enemies that we're fighting. So these will make them a lot less effective against you and make you more effective. So it's very, very useful. Then moving down to our ultimate skills, we're going to start with Innervation, which you can see is right here in this little skill tree. And we're going to want to put 3 points into Innervation right away. So that one will give us up to a 30% chance to gain 8 energy. Then we're going to want to do 3 points into Trap Mastery. So that one says when Poison Trap or Death Traps activate, you gain 12% increased critical strike chance against vulnerable and crowd-controlled enemies for 4 seconds. So after Trap Mastery, we're going to want to get our ultimate skill for this build, which you can see I don't have yet, but if I did, it would be Death Trap. And we're going to want to upgrade that with all 3. So with that, it says place a trap that arms after 1.25 seconds. It activates when an enemy moves within range, dealing a total of 1,106 damage to each enemy in the area. It's very useful and you can use it a lot, and it deals shadow damage, which is great for slowing enemies. We're going to want to improve that with Prime Death Trap, so it says enemies are pulled into Death Trap when it activates, which is very useful. And then we want Supreme Death Trap, which says if Death Trap kills an enemy, its cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds. So any enemies that die in there reduce the cooldown of the next time you can cast Death Trap. So I find, especially when using this one in large groups, that you can use Death Trap very rapidly, oftentimes a lot quicker than you'll be able to reuse your Poison Trap. Then we're going to want to put 2 points into Aftermath. So it says after using an ultimate skill, restore 25 energy. And so this is our ultimate skill here. So this will help us boost our energy. And if we put 2 points in, it'll be 50 energy instead of just 25. Then we're going to want to put 1 point into Adrenaline Rush, which says while moving, you gain 5% increased energy regeneration. We want it so we can put 3 points into Haste, which says while at or above 50% maximum energy, gain 5% increased movement speed, while below 50% maximum energy, gain 5% increased attack speed. And then moving down into our key passive, again, we can only have 1 of these. We're going to want to get Exposure. And so that one is, it says dealing direct damage to an enemy affected by a trap skill has up to a 25% chance to reduce the active cooldowns of your trap skills by 20%, drop a cluster of exploding stun grenades that deal 40% total physical damage and stun enemies for 0.5 seconds. So that one is very, very useful. It's great because it's going to, we deal direct damage with trap skills a lot in this build, so this will happen a lot. And so that has a great chance of reducing your active cooldowns, which is useful, which means that you can keep using trap skills, which will keep affecting this one. So it feeds into itself like that. Plus, you've got a decent chance to drop a cluster of exploding stun grenades that deal damage at any given time. So that one is super, super useful for this build, which, like I said, it is a Twisting Blades build. You use your Twisting Blades a lot to deal direct damage, and you can do other things. You know, you can use other perks and stuff to deal direct damage all the time, but most of what you do with this build is constantly trapping your enemy with your Poison Trap until you get to the point where you can use your Death Trap and then with your Death Trap. So that is how you're going to want to level out your skill tree. For our Specialization, which is the middle part of choosing your thing, you can either do combo points, which says your basic skills now generate combo points, core skills consume consume combo points for additional effects, blah blah blah. Inner Sight, which says attack marked enemies to fill up your inner sight gauge when it's full, gain unlimited energy for 4 seconds, or Preparation, which you unlock at level 30. Doesn't matter, use Inner Sight. This one by far is the best one to go with, because when it's full you get that unlimited energy for 4 seconds. Next up, we're going to have aspects that I recommend going with, and so we're going to start off with the Helm, and if you can get it, I recommend the aspect of the Protector. So this one says damaging an elite enemy grants you a barrier absorbing up to, and the one I have it enchanted with says 360 damage for 10 seconds. This effect can only happen once every 30 seconds. For your chest armor, on this one I'm honestly going to recommend just sticking with the aspect of Disobedience. It's useful. It's in this case, it says you gain 0.25% increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 25%. For our gloves, it depends what you want to go with. I have the Blade Dancers aspect on here because that it's one that helps Twisting Blades. So what the Blade Dancers one does is Twisting Blades orbit for a short time after they return to you, dealing 10% of Twisting Blades return damage per hit. Based on the distance the blades returned, the orbit damage increases up to 20% of the return damage. For our legs, we're going to want to pop the aspect of Might on there, and so basic skills grant 20% damage reduction for 2 seconds. For our boots, there's a couple ways to go. If you have the Penitent Greaves, which are a unique item, that is what I would use here. If not, there's a number of ways you can go. I like to use the eluding aspect on here. So it says becoming injured while crowd controlled grants you unstoppable for 4 seconds. This effect has a 40-second cooldown. This one's just useful for the times where you do get down to that point where you're injured, so you're down below 35% life, or you're crowd controlled or whatever, and this can help you get out of that. Depending on where you are in the build, you might not have gotten to the ultimate skills yet, and so you'll have an extra slot. If that's the case, then if you have a ranged weapon that you want to use, you can pop anything on there that's going to improve it, and that will give you the skill. So what I did is I imprinted the aspect of Barrage, or whatever it's called, the Barrage aspect, which gives you the ability, it says Barrage arrows have a 30% chance to split into 2 arrows whenever they ricochet. For our amulet, there's certain ways you could go. Obviously, if we're going to be leaning heavily into the trap skills, the best one to use there is the Blast Trapper's aspect, which says dealing direct damage to enemies affected by your trap skills has up to a 30 to 50% chance, and that will depend on the item you have. Chance to make them vulnerable for 3 seconds, so it will make them more vulnerable. Again, for our rings, anything that's going to speed us up is going to be super useful. So if you have the accelerating aspect, then definitely use that on your ring, because that one gives you, it says critical strikes with core skills increase your attack speed by 15 to 25% for 5 seconds. For our second ring, we're going to want to, if you have it, pop on the aspect of the Umbral, and so this one says restore one of your primary resources when you crowd control an enemy. So every time we crowd control someone, we're going to be getting that energy back, which is going to be useful because this build, obviously, as I already said, just sucks energy. For our one-handed weapons, because that's what we're going to be using on this one, whether they're swords or daggers, if you have it, I recommend using aspect of synergy on at least one of them, because that one is super useful for this build, and it says using an agility skill reduces the cooldown of your next subterfuge skill by 20%. Using a subterfuge skill increases the damage of your next agility skill by 10 to 30%. So the aspect of synergy is very, very useful because in this build, we're going to be using agility and subterfuge skills quite a bit. Either speeds up your ability to use the next one or increases your damage to the next one. So swapping back and forth between them makes it very useful. So if you have aspect of synergy, use it on at least one of your one-handed weapons. And then on your other one-handed weapon, you have 2 options here that both work really well. On this one, I was maximizing my Twisting Blade, so I did the Blade Dancers one again on here, so it's just getting that Twisting Blade orbit for a short time after they return to you, blah, blah, blah. You get that extra damage with Twisting Blade. Otherwise, the other best one to go with is the Edge Master's aspect, which says skills deal up to 10 to 20% increased damage based on your available primary resource when cast, receiving the maximum benefit while you have a full primary resource. So if you've got full energy going into it and you use any of your skills using that weapon, it's going to give you that huge damage boost. So Edge Master's aspect works really well. As far as our stat priorities here, we'll just go down the list. So our stat priority for our helmet is going to be primarily anything that gives you a cooldown reduction, increases your max life, your total armor, or any life gained on a kill. Anything like that is going to be prioritized on your helm. For your chest armor, damage reduction from close ranged enemies, damage reduction from any poison. For our gloves, we want to focus on anything that is going to improve our Twisting Blades, our critical strike chance, our attack speed, or any lucky hit improvements we can do. For our legs, anything that improves max life, damage reduction from poison, and damage reduction from close ranged enemies. For boots, improvements to movement speed or movement speeds after killing anyone, especially elite enemies. For our amulet, obviously with jewelry, one of the most important things to focus on is going to be a reduction in our cooldown timers, so anything for that is key. Other than that, energy cost reduction is kind of the same thing, so that as well. Rings, for both of those, anything that improves our vulnerable damage, critical strike damage, critical strike chance, or any maximum life / energy regeneration. So for both your rings, try to focus on those if you can. And then for our one-handed weapons, anything that improves our vulnerable damage or critical strike damage or our damage to close range enemies, that's going to be what we focus on there. So we want to try maximizing our vulnerable damage and critical strike damage because that's most of what we do in this build. Then for gems to slot, as far as weapons go, we're going to want to boost our crit damage as much as possible. So we're going to want to slot our highest level emeralds that we have and can use because that's going to give us that critical strike improvement to vulnerable enemies. So emeralds on your weapons. For armor, we're going to want to focus on rubies because that's going to help us with our maximum life. This is a relatively glass cannon class and build, and so if we can improve our life, that's going to help our survivability a lot. So any armor slots you have, let's slot some rubies in there. And then, as is usually the case with my builds, the most valuable thing to put on your jewelry is going to be skulls. So the highest level skulls you have and can put on based on your level are what I recommend putting in your jewelry. So the fun thing about this build is it's not the one big thing. So if you saw my Barbarian build, the one big thing is the whirlwind. That's not really the case with this one. This one is more of a balanced gameplay. It feels like you're just playing a regular character. And with that, we're going to be using a lot of our basic attacks and just going for these high intensity, very rapid attack. And you can see that the general gameplay loop can be, and often is in my experience, just using your two basic attacks. That being your basic attack, which in this case is, the one that you can deal up close or you can throw for range, and then our twisting blades. As is always the case, we should try to maximize how much we're using twisting blades just because it's going to make things fast, and that is how we maximize our damage output. And it's nice because with that spinning and everything, you can deal damage to multiple enemies as you're retreating or whatever the case is. So maximize how much you can use that, and it makes this build just as effective as possible. We're going to use our Shadow Step and Dash abilities to get around the field. So there's our Shadow Step, which you can see we've slowed the enemy, we've made them vulnerable, and we did damage to them while moving around. Then Dash is one that we can use to go through multiple enemies. It's very useful for that because you deal damage to everyone that you do it with. But also, it's just great for moving around the battlefield. So that's our basic route, but then outside of that, it's all about the traps. So in this instance, the one that we currently have access to is our poison trap, which we can toss down, and you can see that we can get our people to get very, very poisoned by that indeed. And so that's very useful. And then outside of that, once you've got your ultimate skill, which is the death trap, we're going to want to use that as often as possible as well. So that is the basic way to use this build. That's the gameplay loop for it. So that's all for today. Hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful, but we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching another Dare to Game video. If you liked this video, please leave a like and a comment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like my content and would like to support this channel, consider becoming a member today for as little as $1.99 a month. It makes a huge difference. But in any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.